team. Please welcome Elijah Wood.
Hello, look at this. Seats. It just appeared.
Hello, everyone. Are you all having a great convention? This is like almost as big as Hall H. This is a big deal.
Just 5,000 of your closest friends and something. Look at you.
Thanks for showing up.
My name's David, I'll be your moderator for over the next hour. I'm so happy to be here. I mean, just looking at that highlight reel, you've had just an incredible career. I mean, even before Lord of the Rings, you had a whole career doing movies all the way back to, I think, Back to the Future, too. Did you guys know those two movies, right? Of course, come on.
Yeah, that, incidentally, Back to the Future 2, I think, was the first job I had in a movie.
That's a heck of a way to start.
I know, a hell of a way to go. Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? I mean, that must have just been an eye-opening, incredible experience, and your first step into a major, major blockbuster.
Yeah, it was pretty mind-blowing. I mean, I had seen Back to the Future, so I was familiar with Hill Valley and, like, you know, the sort of downtown area and the clock tower and all of that. So going on to that set, but it was set in the future, was totally mind-blowing. And, like, all these futuristic cars driving around, and it was insane. It was like a crazy playland that it was hard to compute that with reality, because I'd seen that movie and knew Marty McFly, knew these characters, and to suddenly see it all sort of play out in front of me to an 8-year-old was pretty insane.
And you have a unique perspective because you've been in the movie business for a while, first as a child actor and then as an adult. How have movie sets changed in your opinion? Not just from your perspective of being a kid on a movie set, but I mean, Peter Jackson and the technology behind The Hobbit and the crazy work that Weta Workshop does and Weta Digital. Can you describe from your perspective how you've seen movies change over the years?
Oh my God. I mean, Jesus, leaps and bounds. I mean, even on Lord of the Rings, we were doing things and they were doing things that had never been done before. They were making up technological advancements as we were going. So, I mean, I've literally seen that in real time. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of there being a really significant change, this is so funny, but the playback monitor. Do you know what that playback monitor is? So yeah, so you know, you're shooting. Oftentimes, it used to be on film. Now it's primarily digital, but you would have a monitor that would be recording and showing you. In the old days, sort of an approximation of what the camera was seeing, so that you could sit and watch what the shot was, and then go back to the playback monitor, have it play back, and sort of see, you know, a version. But the old playback monitors weren't great. They were sort of bad videos. You'd get this sort of degraded version on low-resolution screens. This is way before HD. So you couldn't I mean, you could get a sense of what you were shooting, but not in any kind of great detail. And now, the monitors are full HD and beautiful, and on The Hobbit, they actually had 3D monitors. So you could watch, Peter would watch the scene as they were shooting it in 3D. Like actually, not even an approximation of what they were getting, exactly what they were getting, which is a huge thing.
One of the things I love about those movies is all the appendices that come out because you feel like you're there on the set. How many of you watched all of those behind the scenes? Was there anything, even after sort of the Video Village playback where you can really see what's going on, was there anything that you saw in the theater that surprised you on either The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings versus when you shot it? Like, oh, that's what it's going to be like. Any scenes come to mind where you just go, oh, wow, that really surprised me how that turned out?
Oh man, so many. I mean, there were scenes where there were monsters that we were acting opposite that weren't there, obviously, physically on the day. So the She-Love spider sequence was completely mind-blowing. Because I think the only thing that we had there was a giant, sort of janky reference of a giant spider. So there's obviously no spider there, and then the cave troll sequence. Seeing all of those things fully put together, and the sort of reality of what they became was unbelievable. And there were so many of those vistas, where the backgrounds they would add castles or elements that weren't physically there in the day. So many of those things.
I was so taken aback by the music of Howard Shore too. Like that was something. You're a musician, right? The soundtrack to Lord of the Rings. What did you think when you just saw all of the elements together in terms of its emotional impact? Because as an actor, you're trying to pace out, your big dramatic moments.
Sure.
What was it like hearing all that together with the emotional impact? Did you feel like, oh, this is exactly what I was going for, or it's even better, or oh, I want to change this one thing, or what was that like for you, hearing all of that together with the music?
Oh, it was incredible and very emotionally impactful. I mean, the score that Howard created for the films, the themes, the Hobbit themes, these things now to a certain degree, I don't know, it's almost like we've taken it for granted, or I have in a way, because it's so organically tied into what those films are and what they became, that you sort of forget the extraordinary work that went into it. And it was so thickly attuned to the storytelling and to the world of Middle-earth. I mean, all of those things came together in such a beautiful way. And finally seeing the first film for the first time was so extraordinary. You work for 16 months on a film or a series of films, we shot them all at the same time. So to finally see that first movie was overwhelming, actually. It was almost too much to take it all in. Because, you tie in all of your own personal experiences of making them, too. At the end of the day, it's often difficult to separate those two things. We, unfortunately, as actors and anybody who works on these movies, don't get that objective experience. You don't get to see something objectively as a fan. You have all of your experiences making it sort of tied into the experience of watching it, but yeah, it was amazing to see it all put together.
And then you came back for The Hobbit.
Yeah.
I mean, right? Give it up for it. And you haven't aged a day. I mean, come on, right? I was just like, wow, it was just like it was, when did you shoot that? 99, the first Lord of the Rings?
Yep.
Yeah, it was just like it was 1999. I couldn't believe it. What was it like walking onto the set again?
So surreal.
I mean, you're a huge fan of the Hobbit book as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I sort of grew up reading The Hobbit. It was, the whole thing was really surreal. I remember when they had sort of briefly mentioned to me that there was the possibility that Frodo might come back, which was incredibly exciting. Just the opportunity to go back and revisit New Zealand, Peter and Fran, a lot of the same crew. It was an opportunity I never thought I would have again. I thought The Lord of the Rings was it, that Frodo obviously does not exist within the context of the Hobbit. But their idea was really interesting, this idea of a sort of prelude where you kind of get a little glimpse of what happened with Frodo before he then ran off to meet Gandalf in the beginning of the Fellowship. And it was such a clever little piece, this idea of there being a bookend, and also sort of establishing the state of mind that Bilbo is in as well. But going back, I think the most surreal aspect of it was how normal it felt. Like after that much time that had passed, it sort of felt like I'd stepped back into time and, oh, yep, here I am, back in again. And there's Peter coming around the corner giving me, a note on the last take, and it felt normal. Like
you never left.
Like I never left. The wardrobe was the same. I looked down at my feet, I'm like, well, the feet technology's better. It's not the only thing. That was actually kind of amazing. So I'm sure you've all seen the appendices. So we used to have to glue our feet into these prosthetic feet that would sort of stop around our ankles. And that was a thing every day for about an hour and a half. We'd be standing up as they glue these things onto our feet. Well, in the time that passed, they built basically like shoes that went all the way up below the knee, and they were full silicone as well. They weren't latex, which is not as nice and is not as nice on film. And they had all of the wig lace sort of built into it. So literally they were slip-on Hobbit feet. And so everybody on The Hobbit who had Hobbit feet or who played Hobbits, they would just slip them on. So I'm like, you have no idea. It's so not fair.
I remember remember that shot in the appendices of Graham McTavish taking those kind of hobbit boots and pouring out, well, dwarf boots in his case,
all
and
the
pouring
sweat.
the sweat.
Yeah.
It was like a water bottle of sweat. It was crazy.
It's real, yeah. Your feet and your leg are fully stuck in like a silicone, non-breathable material. So yeah, it's a river in there, man.
Well, I think when you're sitting in a movie theater with your popcorn or you're at home on the couch watching, it's hard to imagine how physically demanding those movies are. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you're in it. I mean, fully in terms of. I mean, you're climbing mountains, snowy mountains, and you're dealing with water, and you're fighting with Gollum, and you're doing all kinds of stuff. Can you just talk about the physical exertion after having to shoot for over a year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of the primary thing that made it difficult, was the notion of endurance. You know, it's 16 months of shooting, but as we went on, we ended up shooting normally 6-day weeks. That became the norm. And there were as many as 5 different units shooting simultaneously, and we would be back and forth between different units. And then a lot of our work was on location. And that was very physically grueling, not only for us as actors, but also just logistically getting from one place to another. Some locations you'd have to helicopter up to the top of a mountain, which was extraordinary. I mean, the scale that we were working in, yet it felt like, weirdly, the world's largest independent film. Because it felt very, I don't know, very organic, and the crew very much felt like a family. And I remember one occasion we couldn't get up to the top of the mountain one day, so we had to look for something to shoot. So Peter walked with the location manager, and I think one of the producers, and like knocked on a farmer's door and asked him if we could use his land just to like shoot some stuff with the hobbits walking. That's how homegrown it was too, in terms of just like the scale of it versus the sort of approach, which felt very kind of small town in a way, which was really charming and endearing. But yeah, I mean, all of that stuff on Mount Doom, most of that was on location, you know, sort of scaling, not necessarily a mountain, but the side of one. Yeah, it was very physically taxing, cold. We had a lot of elements we were dealing with, snow, rain. You know, unfortunately for the hobbits, their wardrobe got less as the journey went along. It's not like they like picked up some orc pants along the way. Like, they're fucking shorts, and they got tattered. They would just get more and more tattered. And Frodo, because he was always sweating, I guess, because they were in Mount Doom, and it was hot in Mount Doom. It was not hot when we were shooting. Yeah, they would put, to make it so that they didn't have to like spray me with sweat every day, they would just put baby oil on the shirt. So it was like this heavy, kind of sticky wetness that was like, as soon as it hit any kind of cold weather, it became that much colder and damper. Oh man, yeah. That was the not having enough wardrobe for the hobbits. I mean, at least like, all of the humans, they had leather jackets and coats and capes and... Yeah, we didn't have that.
I'm kind of happy and sad I asked you that question.
It's just sending me back. I'm like having flashbacks.
Yeah, you know that was. Now, when you were on The Hobbit and you saw the whole crew arrive, of all the different dwarves, was it kind of like watching the freshman class come in? Like, did you feel like a senior, like, you don't know? You don't know.
Yeah, it did.
You and Andy Serkis over the corner like...
Back in our day. Yeah. I mean, when would I ever have thought I'd have an experience like that, you know? To have worked on a trilogy of films and then revisit that world on a new trilogy with a whole new group of people. It was very surreal. But yeah, it was this thing, more for me, it was this excitement of, I know what they're experiencing and how much fun this is. And what a joy that these guys get to have this sort of similar experience over the course of a year and be attached to these extraordinarily epic movies, and they get to live in New Zealand, they get to experience so much of what we did that I miss so much. So much of it for me, I mean, when I went to New Zealand to do the little bit that I did, I think I only worked like 3 days, but I was there for a month, just hanging out. And I would like drive the set every day and just hang out with everybody, see what they were up to, and hang out with the dwarves. They were all so friendly, and they had clearly formed a bond as well, which was so great. But it was surreal walking onto set, because it was the same first AD. It was like, I think the same sound department. So many of the crew were the same, so beyond the major difference on The Hobbit was that technology had exponentially grown. So they were shooting the entire thing on the red camera. It wasn't being shot on film. They were all 3D cameras. So there was more tech on set. And there were a hell of a lot more trailers. Oh my God, so many trailers. So the machine had gotten bigger. But that was really the only difference. Beyond that, it very much felt the same, which was so endearing and charming.
I don't know if you got a chance to see all the cool Hobbit stuff outside. You guys all saw that, right? Yeah, the trolls and Azog over there.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I thought, man, what a missed opportunity for Elijah Wood, because you could have just really punked some people by just putting on a costume and just
standing there?
I would have paid good money for a camera crew to capture that. That would have been really cool. Now, I mean, we'd be doing you a disservice if we just talked about Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, because you are such a multifaceted artist, really. You're a DJ. You're a pianist. You've done not just film, but video games and TV and voiceover. Tron, Uprising, an incredible show. And we're here at Salt Lake Comic-Con, and we're celebrating all kinds of different genres. Even though you've touched so much, do you think about different big franchises like Star Wars or Harry Potter or James Bond or whatever, and you go, man, I'd really like to play a role in that? If so, what would you ever want to do and why? Like, what are some of your favorite other franchises?
I mean, I would love to be in a Star Wars movie. I think that for almost everyone here, I'm assuming correctly, is like, that's the pinnacle. That's the great. That's one of the greatest sagas of all time, in my opinion. So yeah, the fact that they're making these new films, I mean, even to be a part of one of the standalone films, just to be able to walk into that universe. I got to visit The Force Awakens, which was amazing.
Oh, you did? Wow.
They were just near the tail end of shooting. They were about a week out from being done. So a lot of the sets have been taken down, but the Millennium Falcon was still up. So I got to walk into the Millennium Falcon, which was so mind-blowing. The craziest thing about it, actually, there's a really great, did y'all see Kevin Smith when he talked about visiting the set?
Oh yeah.
It's worth looking it up, because it's really emotional and beautiful. He tells this whole personal story of walking onto the Millennium Falcon, and how every step he took, he grew younger. He like turned into a 7-year-old child again. But the thing that freaked me out the most was how familiar I was with the geography of the interior of the ship. Like, oh yeah, I know where I'm going. What? Like, how had the interior geography of like rooms and where they were in relation to other rooms, that I knew it. I knew the map of the ship. So everything was as if I'd been there before, and that is very strange. But I mean, I suppose, having watched those movies as much as I have, and I'm sure you all would probably feel the same way, we know that space, so that really freaked me out. I was like, oh yeah, I know this. And then if I turn the corner here, that's gonna be the cockpit, and if what the fuck? That freaked me out the most, like, how much that had been burned into my mind.
You know, I feel the same way about the sets for Rivendell and the Shire, and some of those places were just so real. And I know your perspective is so unique because you lived the shooting of it, but for us, it is just pure magic. I could sit up here and talk about it all day with you, but I know you're all here to ask questions.
We certainly could.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that, you know, you've seen all the appendices too. There's so many things to discuss about the making of those films. People often ask me like, oh man, I'm sorry, can I ask you questions about that? And I'm like, yeah, it's interesting to talk about. There's a lot to discuss.
Well, speaking of which, this is now your opportunity to ask Elijah Wood here at Salt Lake Comic-Con some questions. So we're going to open it up to the audience, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, of course.
Let's go ahead and start right here.
Hi.
When you were littler, what was your favorite movie you were in? Like,
I was younger?
yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. You know what's fun? Maybe. There's like two tiers to that. When I was really young, it was probably Radio Flyer. Because I had a really wonderful experience making the film, and I love the movie. I think it's really beautiful. That was very special. And when I was slightly older than that, The Ice Storm was probably my favorite film.
The Ice Storm. Yes, right here.
Blank.
It happens to everyone.
It happens to me, and I'm like, yeah, go ahead.
So what is the biggest difference between being a child actor now as compared to being an adult actor?
Well, I mean, independence. Well, I think that there's so many differences. What's available to you as an actor from being a child to an adult. You know, obviously the adult experience is far more multifaceted. So with that comes a variety of different kinds of roles that probably wouldn't necessarily be available to you as a child. That's a good question. I think, you know, some of it is just parallel to your growth as a human. As you grow as a human, your life experience expands, and with that comes growth and understanding and learning and depth and exploration that isn't necessarily the same as a child. And so, in some ways, it parallels the growth of just simply becoming an older, more experienced human. And so, yeah, I guess those are the primary differences. And also, you know, as a child, I traveled with my mom, and you know, obviously when I was 17, I started going out on my own and forging my own path and having my own experiences, and all of that then kind of goes into the work and also, you know, goes into further, I think, what I'm interested in. And I think that's probably the biggest difference is, as I got older, my taste became more specific, and what I was looking for as a filmmaker and an actor became more diverse, and in some ways more specific, and that is probably the biggest difference. The older I get, the more I fall in love with filmmaking, I think, to a certain degree, and also the more my taste is expanded, and sort of specific interests have sort of blossomed. That was a very long answer, I apologize.
That's a great answer.
Hi. Is that a BB-8 dress?
Yes.
Cool.
So I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I've seen all 3 movies.
Awesome.
So here's my question. What was the most difficult scene to prepare for Lord of the Rings? What made it so difficult?
That's a really good question. That is a good question. Most difficult. There's probably 2 sequences that I think are probably came with them the most amount of pressure and difficulty, primarily because they were emotional. The scene on Mount Doom where Frodo is really kind of starting to collapse, right before he fully collapses and Sam picks him up and takes him up the rest of the mountain. That was really challenging, just to make sure that I got that right. The emotional state that he was in, but also the sort of the lack of mental connection to what's going around him. That was difficult, for sure. And then there's a scene at the end of the last film where Frodo is saying goodbye to everyone before he gets on the ship to go to the Grey Havens. And that just had an emotional weight to it, where he's literally kind of going away to die, almost going to a version of heaven, and he has to say goodbye to his family and friends, and that was really difficult.
It's a great question. As kind of a follow-up, just to dig a little deeper on that, when you have a big emotional scene like that, About how many takes was the crew putting you through? I mean, how many times did you have to conjure up that emotion in say those two specific instances?
I can't remember how many takes we did. But I mean, any of those things could be as many as 3 to 10 takes. It just depends on where you're at in that moment and trying to get yourself to an emotional place that feels authentic and real. Yeah, I don't remember specifically either of those two, but it was a great deal of work and focus to get it right,
Right here.
Mexican funeral shirt.
It's an old
That's
band that I
awesome.
really
Do you watch the show?
Of course.
Cool.
My question is actually Dirk Gently related.
Yeah!
I can't
Same.
Super excited.
It's more crazy than season 1.
Which somehow I believe.
It's Max
Knowing Max
Landis.
Landis.
Yeah.
I'm super excited.
I will say this though, it's crazier, but somehow slightly less convoluted, if that makes sense. So if you
I'll take your
found
word
season
for it.
1 really hard to follow, it's not that this is that much easier, but it is a little bit. But yet, it goes way crazier places. Yeah. You'll see. I mean, there's a fantasy land called Wendemore that we go to. It's weird.
Okay, very nice. So my question is Dirk Gently related. If you could have any holistic occupation, be it like detective, assassin, dentist, whatever you want, what would it be? Anything.
Right.
Podiatrist.
Holistic podiatrist. I mean, I would, ooh. See, I want to talk about, here's the thing, right? A proctologist. So here's the thing, I want to talk about, because Blackwing obviously houses all of these people that have these special abilities, the Rowdy Three. Dirk came from Blackwing as, this sort of experimental group of, it's a government agency. You guys watch the show? So in this season, we explore Blackwing a lot more and meet more of the subjects. I want to talk about them because there are cool ones that I would probably pick. But I would say maybe Dirk, holistic detective. I don't know if I'd want to be a holistic doctor. That could have very, very unfortunate results for people. Thank you.
This right here.
Hi.
Hi.
My question, at the end of filming Lord of the Rings, whose idea were the tattoos, and how did that conversation go?
Wow. It's actually kind of not controversial, but hang on. So Orlando is the one who's taken the credit for coming up with the idea. But I don't think that it's accurate. I don't really give a shit about who had the idea or not. I feel like I mentioned it. He definitely mentioned it. So it was sort of like in a conversation, but it was actually really early on. It was actually, I want to say, a month into shooting. So we were in New Zealand for 2 months before we started shooting. And then I think a month into shooting, we started talking about it. Because we knew, it was such a unique experience because we were all there, we knew we were going to be there for over a year. So there was this incredible adventure that was laying out before us, and we knew that we would all be connected forever because of this experience that we were having that was so unique. And so it was actually an idea that we had early on, but everyone was like, initially really excited, and then they were like, wait, we should wait and make sure this is a good experience. I love your enthusiasm. You're probably right. But let's wait to the end and make sure that we're still all really happy and we love each other still. So that's kind of what happened. And then, so we didn't end up getting the tattoos until the end. Yeah, I mean, it's, I need to touch it up because it's all like bleeding together. It's an old tattoo.
Yes, right here.
Hi. So my question was, did you take part in any Billy Boyd's pranks that he played on anybody else, or were you a victim of any of those pranks?
I wasn't a victim of any pranks. I don't think. If I remember correctly. And no, I didn't really take... Yeah, Tig was a bit of a prank. That was a long game, though. Tig, that's true. Tig was that thing where Billy and Dom came up with a game that didn't actually exist. And they were trying to tell me the rules of the game called Tig. And they just kept making up new rules. And many of them would contradict old rules. So it was impossible to actually learn the rules of the game because none of it made sense. And every time I would almost be getting it, they would introduce a new rule that would completely contradict like 5 other rules. And I believed it. I really believed it was real for like a couple of weeks, I think. So yeah, I guess they did get me. Thanks for reminding me about it. And no, I didn't really prank anybody, I don't think. I just heard the stories and thought it was funny, but I don't think so.
Thank you. Right here.
Hi. In the movie North, when you were younger, you did a scene with Bruce Willis where he was in a pink bunny suit.
Yes.
I was curious if you did anything to make that scene difficult for you to film with him.
Like wear a pink bunny suit?
No. He was just Bruce. Like, it was kind of great. He was wearing this big pink bunny suit, but was still like Bruce. If I remember right. And he was very funny. Yeah, but no, he didn't really do anything in the suit that not that I remember anyway.
No Die Hard monologues or anything?
No, that would have been great.
That would have been. Yeah, good behind the scenes fight.
No.
Right here.
Hello, I'm Angela. Did you personally connect with your character Frodo Baggins? And if so, how?
Whoa, good question. Yeah, I mean, I think I personally connect to everyone I've played with on some level. I suppose some would be more disturbing than others, but yeah, I think I had to understand where he was coming from, and in order to embody him, and therefore I think there had to be a lot of me wrapped up in that. So, yeah, I mean, I connected to a certain degree, his experience as a coming of age, in a way. You know, he takes this great responsibility of holding this ring and going on this journey to have it destroyed, which in some ways is not dissimilar from my journey as an actor playing that role, taking on this responsibility of playing Frodo. You know, that was massive. That so many people had read the books and had an idea in their head of who this character was supposed to be. So, in a way, I related to that. And at his heart, he was someone I connected with as a human, because he was ultimately, as a hobbit, very much that kind of innocent, human, warm, loving of home and hearth and friends, which I could very much relate to, but also very curious and fascinated by the outside world and someone who wanted to go on adventures. So I connected to so many elements of him, I think. Yeah, good question. Thank you. I haven't thought about that in so long. There's so many of these kind of questions were questions that we would get when we were promoting the movies, so I haven't thought about them a lot.
Right here.
Hey.
I grew up watching you, and I love the Lord of the Rings films. I got them right here.
Oh, awesome.
I was wondering, what set was your favorite to work on, and what was it like being surrounded with like Samwise and Gandalf and all these amazing characters? What was it like, your friendship with all of them?
Oh wow. The favorite set. I mean, the Council of Elrond in Rivendell was pretty extraordinary in terms of like a big set that you could walk on and feel like you were immersed in it. That was really amazing. And Bag End is my favorite, I think, of all time. There was no, when you would walk onto Bag End, there was no sense that you were in a set anymore. It just felt like this beautiful, cozy, wonderful home that you wanted to live in. In fact, Peter Jackson built it for himself, so he does live in it. But yeah, that was amazing. And it was really cool going back for The Hobbit because they added rooms that didn't exist before. So before, the set would end kind of by where Bilbo's office was, his kind of den. And then the set kind of went around to a hallway, but then it stopped. There was nothing around the corner. And they built that out more, and then they also put in a whole pantry that didn't exist. So it was cool to see, like, expansions. And then what was your other question? Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we became a family, you know? We spent all of our time on set together, and a lot of us would spend all of our time off set together. So we were together all the time and never got sick of one another. And I think, you know, those 2 months before we started shooting were sort of instrumental in bonding everybody together, making them feel like a family, making them feel like old friends, and we very much became that. And it's a real credit to those connections that by month 10, we weren't tired of one another. We still wanted to go surfing on the weekend and get together. So yeah, I mean, the fellowship in many ways became a family. You don't have an experience like that, and I mean, even if there were people we didn't connect with, which there were, you're still tied to this experience that you share. I don't want to make it sound like it was like a tour of duty or something, but maybe it was like going to college. You know, you go to college and have this experience, it's singular. Only you knew what it was like to do that, and then you're sort of linked to that experience for the rest of your lives. And that is a really powerful bond and a powerful connector. So, you know, we don't see each other a lot these days, largely because our lives have expanded and you know, people have families and kids and live in different places, but it's that thing of whenever we see each other, it's like no time has passed and we're right back to the sort of way we used to be, which is really beautiful.
That's great. Well, so few people have done what you've done. There's just such a small group of you that understand that similar experience. It's great.
Yeah, it's so wild. It's difficult to articulate to people. I mean, I remember getting back to Los Angeles after we were finished with principal photography. And I was exhausted. I think the most exhausted that I've ever been in my life. And I remember so many feelings that were so distinct and unique, and I'd never felt them before. I mean, I got home and I was like, I don't know what my life means anymore. I've been living in New Zealand. I've been on this schedule, making this thing for so long that I didn't really know how to function. And then when people would ask me about the experience, it was actually difficult to try and articulate it in such a way that they understood what it was really like. In many ways, those appendices on the DVDs are the best document for explaining what it was like to make those films. It's not easy to actually articulate it. You kind of have to show people.
It's kind of doing it a disservice to describe it in a sentence. How was it? It was good. It was good.
Yeah, it was
like for 16 months, but whatever. It was fine. It was good.
Right.
How are you?
Right. And there will never be another experience like it again. And to a certain degree, as similar as The Hobbit was, The Hobbit wasn't the same for everybody. It wasn't the same for Peter. They weren't forging new ground in the same way. It wasn't the first time. You know, those 16 months and then the consequent ultimate 4 years of making those movies will stand on their own as something that happened that will never happen again. That's awesome.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
Are you a Dr. Seuss character? What are you?
I'm anime.
What is it?
Anime.
Oh, cool. I like your hair.
Could you say your favorite line from Lord of the Rings as Frodo?
Oh man, it's a lot of pressure for 5,000 people. most... I'm gonna totally screw this up. Like, he can't do that accent anymore. I will take it, but I do not know the way.